thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained. What is man that art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? But thou hast made him lower than the earth, and hast crowned him with glory and honor.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing today in Genesis chapter 1. This will be our last day in Genesis 1. There were some questions we had. One was more of a comment, right? Jesus was there at the beginning also. Yes, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning. All things were created by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. Yes, that's correct. The sea of its kind, earth of its kind. Yeah, I made remarks talking about the animals coming from the earth. You know, I mean, because it seems to sound like it's saying, you know, that let the earth bring forth the animals. But I'm not trying to say too much about that, except that it just seems interesting and also, you know, I mean, right, they weren't created out of some other thing. We are all of the earth. The creatures, us, we bear the image of the earthly. And yes, and the sea creatures of the sea. Male and female created on the sixth day. Yes, indeed. Gentiles created, well, we'll talk about that. Did Adam and Eve, okay, we'll talk about that too. We'll remember that question. Did Adam and Eve know how to multiply? Well, I don't really know. It's a good question. It's something to ponder. So let's read Genesis 1, and there's a couple more questions. We'll talk about the Gentile question. What's that mean? You know, I know what they're talking about. Maybe some of you don't. Genesis 1:1, or Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself, upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed is in itself, after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly, after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God multiplied them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Thus the heavens were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God undid his work which he had made. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. And we may have to take in more from chapter 2 here. And it's very interesting, yes. It's a different account, which leads people to believe different things about it, right? Or to question, what is the nature of this? What is the nature of this? Why is there a creation of man in Genesis 1:27, essentially through 31? And we have another creation of man in the next chapter, and also of the beasts along with him, and them being brought to him. And also, notice a change of order. We have the man first created, and then God forms the beasts and brings them to him. So we have a little different, the fowls in the, I'm just pointing this out. I mean, because, like I said, it's like, I don't have a debt to do anything with the scriptures other than present them in the most clear light I can. That to me is the most honest thing I can do for my Lord. Because, the idea that I would sit here and just whatever, it's like, I don't know. When people lie about God, I think, are you insane? I mean, I screw up and stuff, but the idea that you would knowingly say stuff that you don't really believe in, stuff like that, wow. I mean, often we may say things that we aspirationally believe. I mean, we're not. We don't have a lot of confidence, but we believe. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, kind of thing. I mean, I certainly am acquainted with that. But anyways, so this creation here is supposed often to be, well, there's different ways you can look at it. Let's just break it down in the different ways. The first way, and the most common way I would say, or like the way I always, I think the first reading I gave it, until people suggested other things to me. So I consider it kind of a natural reading, which is to assume that the man spoken of and created in Genesis on the sixth day of creation was, that's like I said, in purpose spoken. And then you see a little more detail of it, of the actual happening. Like I said, Christ, the same thing with Christ sat down at the right hand of God, that kind of thing, where it's like, okay, well, on the during the week of creation, like I said, virtually, from God's perspective, nothing may have happened yet, like on a material level, only on a spiritual level. Because God considers, once it's done on a spiritual level, he considers the whole thing done. Just like the works of Christ, finished from before the foundation of the world. So I could see this refers to Adam and Eve, that way. Now, one of the reasons, of course, that's one point of view. And I still tend to favor it, I guess. Now, I did go into a different point of view for many years, which was that there was a 6-day creation and an 8th day creation. I don't really believe in an 8th day. There are 7 days of creation. As far as that goes, like the idea that and the next day, that's reading into the text that I don't care to do. So, but if you want, but that still doesn't mean it's the same thing. Yeah, I mean, just because there's no 8th day, it's just that there's no 8th day. It's just, you could say, well, that's later. Okay, I'll go with that. It could be later, absolutely, but certainly, there's no the idea to read in like, now on another day. I think that's a bit much, but still, not entirely implausible. I don't, like I said, I don't go with that 8th day theory, but the idea behind that would be then that on the 8th day, God created Adam, which is his special man, and that there were other races created on the 6th day. That would be like an Arnold Murray sort of perspective. An Anglo-Israelite often has this, where they have the races being created separately. Now, if you're talking about the blacks and the whites and the Asians, I find that to be pretty thin in my mind, because I mean, if you're gonna like be so tight on like we need to find the races and stuff, well, if we're gonna be tight on the global flood, we look no further than Noah and his sons. But when I think of like created races, I'm like, well, what happened to the Denisovans and the Neanderthals? When I think about separate creations potentially, since they're considered pretty distinct from us. You know what I mean? So, and that would, and what I'm not saying much with that at all, except that, do I regard those creatures as inhuman or as human? And do I regard them as, I mean, if anything is like kind of a different race, you can talk Neanderthals and Homo sapiens or Denisovans. They were significantly different racially, I guess. I don't know. Or, because I think they're still considered Homo sapiens, all of them. But there were some very different kinds of people. The modern humans are all fairly similar. And, races also, I've always thought of it in terms of just like races emerging. Because I always thought of the ancient ancestors being more genetically, let's say, less deteriorated. I would expect our ancestors to be actually superior. Like I said, because I believe that most often what happens with biological organisms is the mutations are harmful. They get cancers. They die. They run down, and then eventually the Earth, cataclysmically, and many of them are destroyed and don't survive. But as far as so, the idea would be that on the 6th day, God created people, or male and female, man or mankind even, because this right here could be considered in that sort of sense. I mean, it could be, it's open to that interpretation. That's what I'm saying. It's like, it's not an interpretation that I favor, but it exists. So that's the idea, because, and people, in the way you get there is you lean on the idea that, well, the description in chapter 2 of the creation of man is vastly different. And once you admit that sort of idea in, it becomes, I mean, once we talk about like, okay, well, there's multiple creations of man, not just multiple stories of the same thing, which is more my mindset, or let's say that's the way I lean, because I'd call it a leaning, because this is not something I recommend getting dogmatic about. You know what I mean? It's like something and you should be excited because it's something you can have an open mind about. It's not going to affect your salvation one way or the other. Some people act like it does. Like if you don't literally interpret Genesis, you're in danger of hellfire. And I understand sometimes we might play a little bit like it might. I mean, I don't want to dismiss the scriptures in any way, shape, or form. But like I said, when it comes to like, well, we're trying to understand in a scientific way how the world was made, this is not trying to give us that information. And that's the thing I assert. It's just not trying. That's not the information being conveyed. And so the idea, if this is a more general creation of mankind, and I don't go with the races thing, though. That's the number one reason I shy away from it is probably the idea that races are somehow created separately. That I don't think so, because the Apostle Paul in the book of Acts says that, I believe it was Paul being quoted, but it's in the book of Acts, that he has made. No, it's Peter, isn't it? It is. Well, let's just look it up. Let's attribute it. Because this is why, and here I'll get into this. This is a good time to bring it up. Because this is why I lean heavily more on I do believe we all descend from one human couple initially. Like I believe that the start off, the story of Adam and Eve, I believe was in some way literally true. You know what I mean? Like that man was put in. Literally true. Well, when I say literally true, my brain automatically goes to ways it could be spiritually true without being literally true. Meaning that it's sort of like, I don't know. The Lord seems to like things to happen materially. And I think he's put it in our heart also to like to see the material expression of things, and that it should not just be a spiritual reality, but also a material reality. So I do think I do think I favor that perspective on here. Yeah, it would be Paul, isn't it? This is Paul speaking. Yeah, but it says, and this is a verse I rely on for this, as far as I think it's pretty important. He hath made of one blood. Now the word blood is not there in Greek, by the way. You can just omit that. He hath made of one. And the one what? Well, it's implied. And we have to supply that because he has made of one all nations of men for to dwell on the faith. So whatever, the idea, because what he's talking about, it's the unknown God speech, right? And the one where he even talks about like that we are all his children in a certain sense, right? Because as their own poets have said, in him we live and move and have our being. Right? But he is made of one thing, whatever it is, one family, one genetic code, one whatever. One. We're all made of all the families of the earth, at least according to what I believe, whatever race you happen to be of, we are all of one something. All the nations of the earth came from one originally. And for a lot of people, that's hard to understand because of the differences in the races. But through isolation, and, we do have, I think there is capacity for variation within species, and humans are no different. And so, you see various climate-related things in the weight distribution of human beings on the planet. I mean, let's be serious here. Why is it the pale, freckled people are all up in the north? As far as that's their distribution prior to the modern age. And they don't need as much sunlight to process vitamin D and stuff. I mean, they're actually equipped for that less light in the wintertime environment. And the people near the equator are darker. I mean, it could be self-sorting, meaning like the light-skinned people kind of fled that, but it's not happening in the modern day. You know what I mean? Which is interesting. So, I mean, I do think the variability within the human family is sufficient to cause, especially when you consider, like, Adam, I would almost consider like a superhuman. As far as he was the first human uncorrupted by cosmic rays, uncorrupted by the corruption that is inherent in the world that causes the deterioration of the human family on some level. I don't know. Like they talk about in the past how we were shorter, but a lot of that has to do with diet. You know, it depends on what past you're talking about. Anyways, I mean, some of that stuff is conjecture and opinion of mine, but anyways, but the idea that all our come from one is the idea I prefer. Though it's fascinating, and like I said, there's a lot of could there be like I said, like a race created separately? I guess I just don't like that idea because it does lend to racism. And Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, he in some ways seemed a bit racist, right? It's not good to give the children's meat to dogs. Speaking of a foreigner, but ultimately through him, in spite of that, and whenever you read that, everyone who reads that, every Christian, it's funny because they'll say like Jesus would never be sarcastic or something, but like, do you really think he meant that as hard as it sounded? Woman, great is thy faith. He immediately turns. I don't think there was as much harshness in it as it might seem. But the Apostle Paul taught us that in Christ there is neither Jew nor Greek. Now, outside of Christ, there is. In the flesh, there is Jew and Greek. There is a difference between people and groups of people. I don't deny that. But I say that can arise simply by being isolated and stuff. We don't have to be different. We don't have to be so different that God created us different. Though each of us is different and God created us different. Each of us individuals. There's so much more difference between us on an individual level. Like the races are more similar than we are as individuals. I mean, I'm more different from my wife than as an individual human being than I am as a white human being compared to a black human being. Like you look at the skin, the things. You could look at different aspects of features of the face depending on who you pick. I mean, it's like there's gonna be different features depending on who you pick to compare. But I'm aware of the theory, and it has certain attractions, right? Because aside from the racial aspect, because humans are supposed to have, according to what we find, great antiquity. I remember my wife asked me, well, when do you think the Garden of Eden was? And I'm like, well, if it was literally the first human beings, it would have had been hundreds of thousands of years ago, which is astonishing. Unless like, really? Really? Well, it seems, like I said, I don't claim, there's nothing dogmatic in me saying that. That's just how I feel it has to be because of just, at least, I mean, it could all be wrong. But a lot of it isn't. That's what I'm saying. It's like when you get, like I said, when I talk about flat earth, when you realize it's like, no, it just doesn't work. You don't need to hear all the other arguments. And same thing with like the age of the earth, as far as I'm concerned. I only needed one ironclad argument. It doesn't matter how young the coins are on the boat. If you want to know how long ago they started minting coins, you look at the oldest coin and sometime before this. That's about it. That's all you can say. That's a reference to Havnid's analogy. From years ago, I remember encountering that. So, he gives man dominion over the fish of the sea. Every moving thing that moveth upon the earth. Now, the question had been put to me about these Gentiles, because that's one of the ideas is that, well, God created people on the earth, and then he created a special group of people, the descendants of Adam, who were going to be the family that would bring about Christ ultimately, I guess you could say. I mean, But we'll get to that soon. That the seed generally is the seed of the woman. I always thought it was very convenient. They had that African Eve theory, which means they just basically through the mitochondrial DNA, I think it was, they traced back all human ancestry to supposedly a single female, which should surprise no one. As at some point, humans begin. I think it's funny they say in Africa. How do they know where would they look under her fingernails for dirt? I know it's probably because of some sort of genetic mapping they do or something like that. I don't know. But anyways, Eden was actually in, if we, it depends on what, that's an interesting theory in and of itself. So I think we should hold on to that for when we talk about Eden, right? But it's hard not to talk about it as we go through that. So we'll talk more about humans, and I will continue to bring up any other, theories about the nature of the creation of man. Did God create multiple groups of people? Well, that's something some people think. And I don't like it because it doesn't fit in with my pretty explicitly anti-racist, in the classical sense point of view. I mean, my idea of anti-racism is I'm against racism. It's not that I go around hurting people for not for not pumping their fist with me or something. I don't know. All right, to every beast of the earth, every fowl of the air. Now this part, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth. Every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. Now, I've always taken this, and people often do, and it makes a great deal of difficulty for me, because I tend to think that human beings need to eat a lot of meat, right? But the truth is that's now, right? I mean, but what about then? When then? After the fall. Well, after the fall happened within. How long was Adam in that garden? Weeks, months, days, hours? I mean, we're not sure, right? So the whole idea of a fall state in which man did not consume meat. Again, you would not find skeletons of men who had lived in this way. Because immediately upon the fall, man does consume meat. The thing that gets me here, though, is that it seems like every animal is also eating meat. Now, it is not a command not to eat meat. I'm sorry, eating vegetable for meat, which is an ironic thing to call it. I mean, vegetables shall be to you for meat. Meat? What's meat? Meat? We never heard of that. We just got created. What's meat for? Well, it's something nice and savory that you eat. It's the flesh of other creatures. But of course, that's an accident of the language, right? Because meat is a figure of speech that they use. They'll say it's for food, where you put it's I forgot the name of it in. There's a name of the figure of speech. I forgot, but it basically where you put one thing for another. You put I think it begins with whatever. I'm not gonna. It's not even. I'm only trying to remember just to see if I can remember. It's not to try to impress you with a big word. So let's just forget about it. But you put meat for food, or or bread for food. Often we'll say, well, your daily bread. It doesn't mean just like literally only bread, no, or literally only meat. So it doesn't mean that what it's saying is, well. So that's the way I generally look at it. Is like it's almost feels like a command, like, and it's not given as a command, but it's like a statement. You're gonna eat the fruit of the tree for food. That's what it seems to be saying, right? And so that implies that there's only vegetarianism going on before the fall. Of course, if you think of the planet coming forth in a gradualistic standpoint, like I've been talking about, or like Hugh Ross, or like anything other than a very strict literal interpretation, it seems like that creates a difficulty. And I wouldn't say it doesn't. So one way you can look at it is this, is that, saying, I hate this explanation. I'm giving you these things. It's not saying like you're required to eat them, but I have provided herbs for food. It says every beast of the earth. Now, I'd love to say beast only refers to, herbivores, right? It only refers to herbivores because, of course, the carnivores can't eat, etc. Let's see. Every beast of the earth. Every beast. K. Yeah. Hey. Hey. That's how you say beast or living creature in hey. It means something that's alive. So, that's not really going to help us limit it to just every beast. I have given the herb for meat. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, here's a way to look at it. I like this better. That when God brought man into being, into this picture, right? The prior to that, history has been as it has been. But when God first brought, and I like this explanation. I do. I like it. I like it a lot. That when God first brought man on the scene, after the cataclysm that wiped the earth clean and made it ready for us to inhabit it. And again, that's my point of view. So speculate. Don't be dogmatic in that, and I'm not. But let's say, and then at the initial state of that, yeah, all the creatures started off vegetarian. At the very beginning of that period, they all started off vegetarian. Even though the world had been different other ways. So is that possible? It's like, well, yeah, with God all things are possible. People always assume it's possible. So why didn't he make the world different? They always want to change it. That's why I try to never say, oh, God had to do it this way. Well, God had to do it this way because of X, Y, and Z. Don't talk about God like that. That's rude. He doesn't have to do anything anyway except the way he wants to do it. Because he's God. And he did it this way because this way was the way he wanted to do it, and he liked it, and he thought it was good. There were other ways possible, sure, but this is the one he thought was good. You know what I'm saying? Like that, because it's about God's choice. It's not about some external standards or forces that cause God to be forced to do things a certain way. I don't like talking about God like that. A lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, God had to do it because of this. Circumstances, pressuring God into a certain... That's not how we should speak about the Lord. He is powerful. He creates circumstances. He determines what shall be. He is not being controlled or moved by external forces. He does things, and it is so. But I like that explanation. It fits, well, for me, I say that, and I'm like, that makes a lot of sense to me. As far as, I'm not continuing, like, because to say, like, that, to suggest, like I was before, that, like, oh, it's just a suggestion. Like, God is making a suggestion. It doesn't sound like that, does it? Yes, we got to be careful. We don't want to, when God makes suggestions, you should follow them. And generally, this sounds like more than a suggestion. It sounds more like a pronouncement or an announcement. This is what you will eat. And it is not a sense of choice, like, I command you to eat this. No, it's just what you eat. You just eat these things. And here's the thing. It is remarkable, right? Because that is not how things work. That is contrary. So when God first brings man on the scene, I will say that he wants it to be a paradise in which, as it is written in the prophet, The wolf shall lie with the lamb, and the lion shall eat straw like an ox. The return to the state where God first brought man in, where he did not initially bring man into the world, and the world itself was not a hostile place when God put man on it. So thus the heavens and the earth were finished. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning. Gentile, again. Well, and I was going to say about that Gentiles point, I don't think we could call the separate races created on the sixth day if that was the case. We couldn't call them Gentiles because there weren't any Jews yet. You know what I mean? Like the Jews weren't invented till at least, Abraham. Well, Abraham had children that were not heirs, like Isaac. Isaac was the heir, like Ishmael and Midian. And then Isaac, well, he had children that were not heirs, like Esau. But then Jacob, all his children inherited. He is the name of Israel. So you could say the Jews began with him, meaning the race of people who were considered the Jews distinctively and ethnically. So really, in fact, like the descendants of Noah, like even if you can think of the world as having other populations existing besides Noah's population, well then, even Noah's population, like Shem, Ham, and Japheth, they weren't all kingdom inheritors. And all the inhabitants of Shem even weren't kingdom inheritors. Most of them were not. It's not even clear that that all the progenitors of Abraham were inheritors. You know what I mean? Though you generally think so, don't you? When we read it, we think of them as inheritors of something, of Noah's legacy, of whatever it was that caused Enoch to walk with God. Something. We tend to think that. We tend to think it was handed down somehow, father to son. Though that's, that does lend to a racial idea, of course. But again, Israel was not faithful. The nation was not faithful. Only real people have faith. Nations don't. And that's why nations don't really get saved usually, except by a great effort whereby all the people come to faith, like like is promised when Jesus returns for Israel. So while if you want to regard this as a special sort of racial creation, it wouldn't be proper to call them Gentiles. Though I get the point, because we're talking about Adam would be the race of men that brought us the Jews, and also the Arabs, and also whatever other groups you think are related. Because we know the Ishmaelites are identified in Arabia for quite a long time, and so it's thought for a long time that they are his descendants, and the descendants of Midian, also in that area, also Ammon, Moab, from ancient times. But they're not considered another creation, but they're considered Gentiles. So, I understand why people look at the differences between blacks, whites, and Asians, and they think like, wow, it's so different. Maybe they were made different. It's like, okay. And here's the thing. If you do believe that, I would encourage you, like Arnold Murray, to then look at that as something good. That God intended to make all the races distinct, and their distinctiveness is a good thing. I do think that no matter how you look at it, God made races. Like he didn't have to make them at the beginning. He brought them forth out of the same way he brings forth salvation out of this kind of crazy chaos of the world that we don't understand how it works, but God perfectly understands. And so also, the races arise out of a process that is so complicated we can't really understand it as individuals, and without, I'm sure humankind could understand it, but I can't, so there's that. All the host of them. When it says all the host of them, that was one of the verses I was like, that makes me feel like, well, what is it talking about? Like, nations of men on the earth? Because, there's a lot more humanity around on the earth than, if you read the Bible too strictly literally, makes much sense. As far as I've seen different things about population, but they assume an awful lot of procreation, and there's always people that don't. There's infertility, disease. All those things are definitely part of life after the fall. One of the things I asserted was the idea that, well, we should get to the fall before I start talking about it, all right? Okay, so he rested the seventh day. That's important. Well, the point is, again, he starts off, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form. And darkness was upon, potentially, and like I said, I have always had a fondness for the gap theory, and I haven't given you a lot of dogmatic stuff on telling you how to interpret Genesis. I've just given you a lot of ideas. I hope that's how you see it. But I do tend to think that there's some sort of, like I said, a lot of it is informed by geology and stuff. Because I do think that the things in geology are true. Like that, I don't know that the interpretations made by them, but the more I can strip that away, like when I talk about flat Earth, you don't have to know anything to observe an eclipse. And I don't have to know a whole lot to look at a lot of different meteor craters. Like all the different meteor craters all over the world. And the size of certain ones of them and how cataclysmic they would be. And realizing nobody ever noticed these things. There have been a few that people have noticed throughout history. They make a big deal. Just as much like a volcanic eruption or anything. So all the host of them, it could refer to the creatures, because all the host of creation is what I would tend to think. All the host of heaven and earth. And what it's mostly summarizing is that God finished everything that he had made. On the seventh day he rested from all the work which he had made. And this is the origin of the Sabbath. God blessed the seventh day, sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which he had created and made. Now, according to the New Testament, one man honoreth one day above another, another man honoreth every day alike. That is because Gentiles do not necessarily come from the same tradition that understood this creation story and that honored the Sabbath as the Jews did. And so Gentiles often did not have the same understanding. And it was not considered something that they had to do to become Christians. Though it is still a wise thing. I mean, God rested the seventh day. Everyone needs to rest. God himself rested and blessed the idea of rest, taking rest from your labors to contemplate. And I like the idea that, he made everything and then he stopped. That also implies something about the nature of creation. That God finished making it and it was all complete, and then it keeps running without him doing anything more. Well, I will say that I do believe everything is upheld by his power, but he's not actively participating in creation anymore after this point. And I think that this is true, barring exceptions like miracles, meaning that God will intervene, but he's not actively working on it anymore. And I think that those periods where God is working on it, that's how things come to be. That's how you get creatures new and exciting. That's how you get things like a Cambrian explosion. God goes to work and things come forth. But then he stops and the work carries on of itself. That's why I say it's like I do think there's some element. Creatures have variability so they can survive. So they can pass on good traits to their there's something to that. But also the idea that it's all happening from accident and there's no divine at all is just absurdity. Well, it's not, I understand it's easy to believe that because God does not make himself apparent. But when he does reveal himself to you, it becomes absurd because you know God on some level, quote unquote, I know, I know Chuck Norris too, but but the question is, would he recognize me on a bus? I don't know. I'd have to say, remember my sister, you know my sister better than you know me. Right. I don't want to be like that with God. It's important, I want to know him and I want to know him like he knows me. That's crazy. But that is the goal. God rested the seventh day. And so, we should rest the seventh day, whether that be spiritually speaking, resting from in the Lord and from the labors, especially the servile labors of this world, the blood and sweat and toil that we have to engage in just to survive. Because part of it is knowing that it's not all about our works, but there's also the enjoying them. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. God wants to bless people. So then it says, so these are the generations of heaven and the earth when they were created. In the day that the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the heavens. I like that because it sort of helps open up my mind to the possibility that, like, okay, if the whole week could be referred to as but a day, and as 1,000 years is a day with the Lord, and 1,000 years is one day, a day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day with the Lord. There was a day, a time. Because just like here, I mean, look at, does it have to be any more clear? I love internal evidence. And what is internal? And evidence within the scriptures. When you get, like, when I talk about the gap theory, and I go to Zechariah 9:9 and Zechariah 9:10, I didn't specifically go there, but I've gone there a lot, and you all know about it, right? The reason I love that kind of evidence because the Bible helps us understand the Bible in that case. But look at, I have given you every green herb for meat. Literally, that's literally meat. No, it's not literally meat, right? But that's the usual word. That's the word for meat, isn't it? Well, yeah. Well, why shouldn't I assume that means that herbs are meat? The fruit is, you bite into it, it's blood and guts and stuff. Well, that's absurd. Well, I don't understand how this meat is any different than the day. Where you put meat for all kinds of food, you put day for all kinds of time. See? You put bread for all, because they would say, while you sit at meat. That means while you're sitting down to eat food. Let's get some meat, they would say. And it doesn't mean, like, literally, it could be a loaf of bread. That's meat. And here he says, fruit and herbs, that's meat. And I say 1,000 years, that's a day. 10,000 years. To you, that's for a day. A week of creation, to you that shall be a moment of creation, or 1,000,000,000 years of creation. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, if every green herb can be for meat, then what can we put for a day? And I was that, to me, that is, I mean, I think that's just absolutely clear as day. I mean, it demonstrates. It demonstrates you do not. Why would you be wooden and literal in a passage that so clearly uses things that are not literal? And again, we literally understand in the sense of, like, well, God's the creator, he makes it. But the terminology, like the days and also just like the groupings and stuff, like to say, like, okay, so now we go look in the fossil record, we should expect to see fishes and birds first. And then I wouldn't look for that. And if I didn't find it, I'd be like, okay, well, whatever. Then that's not what we have. That's not what was inspired. Why would it be? I mean, how would he even express what we know about biology? How would they? How would they understand if it was given to them? I mean, like, there are things that God could tell us that if he told us, well, what would we do with them? We wouldn't know what to make of it. Like if you gave a primitive person, a person who lived in a primitive society, you give them a smartphone with no battery in it. They wouldn't even, they would look at it and they would just think it was some sort of brick. I mean, probably very fascinating. Maybe they think it would be for jewelry or, whatever, but the black surface and all that. But the actual use of the thing would be mysterious. So this is the beginning of chapter 2, really, in my book. And if we didn't have 10 full minutes, that's where I would say we would start tomorrow. But let's read it a bit. Yeah, let's read it a bit. Let's just read it and then we'll conclude and we'll think about tomorrow for tomorrow. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, and every plant in the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. See, now the thing is, before I go on, I'm just going to look at this. See, that the problem with everything I'm saying, though, is because it says in the day that he made the heavens and the earth. These are the generations when they were created in the day that he made the heavens and the earth. I feel like that undermines a lot of what I'm trying to say. A lot of what I would like it to say. A lot of the way I would like to be interpreted. And I want to be mindful of that because I'm not allowed to just do whatever I want. So, again, in the day that, again, still, yeah, does it undermine it? Maybe that's just perception on my part. Maybe I'm just feeling that unnecessarily because I'm like, how, Paul? How does it undermine it? Does it really imply? These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord made the earth and the heavens. Maybe not. But this part about every plant before it was in the earth. And, every herb of the field before it grew. And so there's no rain at this point. There was not a man to till the ground. No man. So again, I usually look at this, like I says, in the day, well, what I think about this verse doing is this places everything that happens afterward in the previous section. So, these are the generations of the heaven and the earth, what he's about to say, when they were created in the day that the Lord made the earth and the heavens. And if I was going to be like, here's the thing, if I was patching two stories together, I would add this verse in the set because the purpose of adding it would be to tell people this is a more detailed look at how it happened. I think. Again, that's opinion. This is how it was. Like I said, I don't think I have a problem with the idea of, like I said, I look at it as being the earth has been wiped clean and the man is being brought forth. And at this time, whatever is being put in, it's really at the beginning of everything that's going to come to be afterwards. So no, it hasn't rained. And the Lord God forms man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Yeah, I'm hesitant to go into this too much, or even to, I guess we could read it, but then we'd just be shortcutting to tomorrow. So let's see. What are we going to call it for next time? Because I want to call it for next time. I think, are we just going to be at verse 4? No, we're going to start at verse 7, and we're going to spend a little more time talking about if there's anything to say here. Okay. There was not a man that went up and missed water the whole. I guess I got nothing more to say about that. I said, that the idea that there was anything before Eden and that week of creation. Again, I don't say there's anything before it, but that the creation week is an overview of creation. And that this microscopic view of man's creation fits into that creation, but also, I guess, is a part of an unfolding of creation. That everything was finished, as it says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished. And all the hosts of them. But we see the heavens and the earth are in motion. They move. And so, while the works are done, everything's still working. Everything's still moving. You know what I mean? Just like the works of God were finished before the foundation of the world, but everything's still moving towards that goal, even though it was done. Because when you set it out right at the beginning, the conclusion is inevitable, especially with the Lord, of course. The way he made the world brought about the destiny that he had ordained for it. And this is the bringing forth of man. So we'll pick up at verse 4 tomorrow. I'm going to just end a little early because I don't want to stretch it I don't want to stretch it. We're just going to take it right here. We'll pick it up tomorrow with the creation of man in this. And we can talk about other possibilities. Anyways, thanks for joining me in this study. Look forward to being back again tomorrow. Until then. There we go.
When I consider thy heavens